So I gave OBS a little break. I hope I'm actually online. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mark Tech coming back much earlier than I expected. I got with my plans done a little earlier than I thought. So I thought I could make like a 45-minute stream talking about a few actually interesting topics that have come to light like in the last 24 hours. Obviously Sunday is the day when Mark Gurman pushes his Power On newsletter, and we also have some other rumors, including new ones for the iPhone SE 4. Dream SMP joining us right from the start. What's up? I'm doing good, man. Really excited to be talking about a few topics that are actually all like, separate topics. It's all not just individual rumors for the iPhone 15 series. It's kind of all coming together. I actually haven't seen much about the iPhone SE 4, like what we are seeing here, because, I basically just got done with my stuff and I wanted to talk about it. I read a little bit about like the Apple Watch rumors, but the iPhone SE is basically new to me as well. This is coming from Unknown Z21, so that should be decent. Apparently we are getting an iPhone 15 Pro style action button. I love it when we call something in the style of something that hasn't yet launched. So what exactly are we getting? My suspicion is the iPhone SE will be updated in some minor fashion in order to accommodate the USB-C legislation of the European Union, because Apple cannot now simply Apple could pretty much reuse an old phone and just cram in USB-C, but I think they know that that wouldn't be very attractive to the majority of the market. So earlier this week, the leaker described the 4th Gen SE as effectively an iPhone 14 derivative. So I assume like an iPhone 15 or 16 chip inside. Dream SMP, congrats on getting the Fold 5. Maybe you can let us know. I'm thinking of bringing back like the Mark Tech Check. Basically a podcast where I talk just to you guys and news are basically secondary. So maybe during that you could join us and tell us how you feel about the Fold 5. And you can of course check out my previous video where I've reacted to reviews of the Fold 5, the Pixel Fold, the Z Flip 5 and the Motorola Razr Plus from the videos from Zone of Tech and from Mr. Mobile. So, but that's enough self-ads. So, that its design will be based on the iPhone 14. Now, that's actually really interesting. Like, would it have like a 6.1 inch screen? Would it be OLED? Like, I've seen some rumors that the supply chains are like preparing for an OLED iPhone SE, which would be a monumental change. It would be like also a giant win for potentially like BOE and like worse LG panels, because I cannot imagine Apple like sourcing Samsung for this, or at least not to the same extent as on the iPhone Pro series or something like that. Like, I assume they would be using as cheap as possible panels that are still designed with their technologies for burn-in mitigation, efficiency, etc. But of course it wouldn't like be an LTPO display. It will have, of course, a USB-C port. That is pretty much not optional by this point. It would have Face ID, so it clearly would be like built upon the iPhone 14. So that explains why they are using the iPhone 14 here basically as a template for the SE4. That's pretty insane. That would be a giant value addition no matter how much they cut off. Like 6.1 inch, even if it's not OLED, from Apple around $400 to $500. Wouldn't be bad, definitely. It would also have, of course, Face ID, as I mentioned, while previous rumors said that it could retain Touch ID, but obviously if Apple already has Face ID and already has a massive supply chain for Face ID, I kind of don't see a point in them using like Touch ID in, let's say, the power button, because why redesign something that already works? This is why I'm so much against the iPad 10th gen, because why do that if you could just give like the iPad Air 128 gigabytes of base storage and get people to buy a more expensive device, not have to invest into redesign, research and development, and then eventually just change the camera position on the iPad Air. Most interestingly, they claim the device will sport an action button like the iPhone 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max. So I assume that would mean it would come significantly later, or like I assume it wouldn't like launch any time like alongside the 15 Plus, the 15, 15 Plus, 15 Pro, 15 Pro Max. I assume it would be like at least half a year removed, maybe like 9 months or so. And kind of like an April launch kind of makes sense for an iPhone SE, right? Or something like that. Maybe even WWDC next year, who knows? It's kind of time to bring iPhones back to the WWDC. Dream SMP, yeah, they are of course going to be using cheaper parts. There's nothing bad about it. Like the Galaxy A series uses cheaper parts than the Galaxy S series. But you have to understand that some parts that Apple uses are literally cheaper for them as like mid-range components than to some other manufacturers that might be low-end components. And that's because Apple orders in massive volumes, and also because while some obviously will say, oh, it's a Samsung panel, if it was just a Samsung panel, Apple wouldn't be able to design the same panel at Samsung, at LG, at BOE. That's why the Pros are, in my opinion, more Samsung panels than Apple panels, though of course Apple had a big hand in designing LTPO technologies in general, for example, together with LG. But yeah, of course, it's going to be cheaper, but Apple does have such a, thanks to Tim Cook partially, has such a good handle on supply chains that they can get decently good components for relatively cheap. Yeah, of course, saying it would use the iPhone 13 screen. Yeah, the iPhone 13 screen is very similar to like the iPhone 12 Pro screen. And the iPhone 14 screen is pretty much the same screen as the iPhone 13. If Apple really wanted to go dirt cheap, they could even use like the iPhone 12 screen, which is technically a little worse than the 12 Pro screen. And they definitely still have some supply for that screen, though with how manufacturing works, I think it's unlikely that any kind of decent OLED like caps out at 600 nits of brightness anymore or something like that. I think there's zero problem for that to get something that goes up to 800 nits or so. It will also reportedly retain a single rear camera setup. I think the main point here would be that it would now use like I assume like an iPhone 13 generation camera with like all the bells and whistles of a main camera of a decent iPhone. But I assume that of course no ultra wide, no zoom, but what I could see is of course finally night mode being there, much better video recording. So there definitely is a lot that would just come from like a sensor that might be like 2 years old by now, but still very decent in the kind of price range where Apple would put it. Earlier this week, it was reported that manufacturers are currently bidding to receive orders for the 4th Gen SE's OLED panel. So this is kind of why I think that this could be the breakout moment for BOE. If BOE creates like a massive production lineup for the iPhone SE's OLEDs, then this could like stabilize them as an Apple supplier, because for years we've heard like, oh, BOE is gonna mass supply this iPhone or this iPhone, and it always happens to a little degree, I think, but it's like infinitesimally small in comparison to what Samsung and LG are providing for Apple, and before that, like Japan Display, while Apple was still using LCDs. So yeah, I definitely don't think that we're getting something revolutionary. Like, I think even if it would be like in the $500 price range, this is in the $500 price range. We're now seeing a lot of like 120 hertz, or at least like 90 hertz panels. Granted, those are the same panels, just overclocked, but they usually are a tad better. Like maybe they could go to 900 nits or something. So yeah, it's definitely cool. The next gen SE is also believed to be among the first to contain Apple's long rumored custom 5G modem. That is not what I see happening next year. If this model comes out next year, so Apple can comply fully with like the USB-C laws, from everything that I heard, it's like the 5G modem is like launching in 2025, but who knows? Apple might just wait until the very last moment and then launch it with the modem. Who knows? Maybe it is just a little, it will be done a little sooner than most people expect. So it's an interesting rumor. I know most people in my audience don't really care for the lower end products. I think the action button will actually be a really nice differentiating factor for iPhones across the board, similar to how the mute switch was actually a big differentiating factor from everything but OnePlus. Basically, this would be like now a differentiating factor for every Android that doesn't have like the Bixby button that could be repurposed. This would now be also like very well integrated into first and third party software. It would work very familiar no matter on what iPhone you are. So I think Apple would have a really good marketing point, especially if they launch the iPhone 15 that doesn't have it, and then the iPhone 16 copies almost everything from the 15 Pro, including the action button, and this is how the design basically comes together, because by that point they would also be launching the iPhone SE or something like that. Again, it could be that it's only 2025. My hunch is 2024. Like, leakers have been repeatedly wrong with SE predictions, but who knows? Guys, let me know, what do you think about this? Like, would you be interested? Are you an iPhone SE user, or are you somebody who might be gifting an iPhone SE to a family member, a friend, or something like that? I think that's very interesting, because even though I believe most of my audience is kind of enthusiast-grade hardware users, I think we all, to some degree, interact with cheaper hardware still. So this is the iPhone SE. Again, not super detailed. I mean, it's a lot more than I expected, like knowing about Face ID, USB-C, the action button, but like no release date, no clear indication of what processor it might use. So I think we will be getting more news about this in the next month, and in the next few months and years, of course, to come, like in the next 12 months, let's say. And of course, we are now getting to the good stuff, and I've taken the liberty to reuse front page tags like squared off Apple Watch design concept or leak, as it was for them, as my thumbnail, because, well, I thought it would be funny for one. But apparently we are finally getting a 10-year anniversary Apple Watch X. And of course that sounds a little provocative, because the iPhone X was arguably the biggest redesign in iPhone history. It's hard to imagine what could happen with the Apple Watch functionality-wise that could match the iPhone X redesign, because the gesture user interface was, to me, the main redesign, and it was enabled by the larger screen. However, I don't know just how much change will we see beyond maybe the chassis changing right? I like the screen itself is already pretty much full screen. We both have a curved model with like the regular series. We have a flat model with the Apple Watch Ultra. So I don't know. And to be honest, I will be reading this because I usually try to summarize it, but I haven't had time. So bear with me here. This will be basically like a reaction video with me stopping whenever I get to something interesting. So this year upgrade will be minor. I have always said I like processor upgrades, so I don't care. But then either next year or the year after that, we're getting an Apple Watch 10. So, or an Apple Watch X, if you want to put it like that. So, Apple is planning a splashy upgrade for your smartwatch, but not in this year. So 2024, 2025 maybe. Inside Apple, executives have pondered the idea of switching away from the slow but steady annual upgrade cycle. It depends, right? In my opinion, I think that every kind of update is worth to have, but if they could like switch to like an 18-month cycle so that every new watch could have like an actual new processor and maybe like some kind of slightly tuned sensors in a way that enables technologies like crash detection, I think that could work really well. Maybe even go full 24 months whenever the technology evolves very slowly, right? But overall, I do still like getting updates as soon as possible. But unlike with the iPhone, claims to the main Apple Watch are fairly minor on a yearly basis changes. Last year, the series, I know. Like the Series 6 had a faster chip. I've already broken that up, like talked with you guys about all of this. Like again, the Series 6 was not bad, faster chip, blood oxygen sensor. Series 7 with Siri for some reason activated on my iPad. Series 7, the larger screen. Series 8, oh my god, it's activating it because I'm saying the word series. Oh, this is so crazy. Thank god you cannot guys hear that. Let me know, is there some kind of interference because of Siri? Okay, my stream is working, so I'm checking it on my iPad if it's working, and it kind of started crashing because of Siri. That was crazy. So, of course, he points out that the Apple Watch Ultra was a more impressive update. I've already said S6, S7 were not as bad as some people claim to be. Faster chip, blood oxygen reader on one, larger screen on the other. Then S8 followed up with crash detection and stuff like that. So I think it's quite good. But 2023 will be another low-key year, probably just a faster chip. And then we're getting the Series 9. The new watches will remain the same size as current models, 41 and 45 millimeters for the S9 and 49 millimeters for the Ultra. So that goes for any kind of like speculation about like a 46, 47 millimeter Apple Watch Ultra, at least for this year. In terms of features, arguably the most minor upgrade in the product's history. If you spent $800 on the Apple Watch Ultra last year, it's unlikely you will want to spring for this version. That's absolutely true, and I didn't buy the Apple Watch Ultra last year. So to me, it's actually a worthwhile upgrade. Of course, this is something that I think should be pointed out much sooner, that Apple doesn't release watches so that people could upgrade each year. It's because there are more people coming into the category and people upgrading from much older watches. This is why Apple tries to give you as many updates as possible, so whenever you buy an Apple Watch, you have the best one, you have the best experience with it, unless you bought like an S3. Dream SMP, don't worry, man. If you have to go to the market, that's completely fine. Feel free to join us. The next stream, I will let you know when it happens. I always appreciate all of you who are here. Okay. So that was basically a lot of nothing, I would say. And now he finally gets to like the good stuff. For one, he says that everything is basically has built on the Series 4 since 2018. But that's poised to change. Apple is planning a Watch X or Watch 10 to mark the device's 10-year anniversary, and it promises to be the biggest overall yet. The category was unveiled in 2014, so of course that could mean either launch in 2024 or 2025. So the X model will be thinner, and they have explored ways to changing the ways the bands are attached. So that would be interesting if Apple makes old bands completely incompatible, maybe some kind of small adapter or something like that, or maybe like new bands just fit it much better or something like that. But yeah, obviously I cannot guarantee anything. One potential change for it would be like a round Apple Watch, which some people have asked for. I personally couldn't care less about round smartwatches. Like, they are just so bad for text and stuff like that, that to me it makes no sense. But it could attract a new kind of audience, and it could like ask for a new like watch attachment mechanism. Especially since the bands would now have to be like rounded off as they connect to the body of the Apple Watch. Who knows? Starting with the original Apple Watch, bands have slid into the sides of the chassis and attached via a locking mechanism. Keeping the design the same let the band stay compatible with old and new models, but it has downsides. People involved in the development of new Apple Watches say the system takes up considerable amount of space that could be better filled with a bigger battery or other components. So we are getting a thinner Apple Watch. That could mean that it's enabled by a lot of components, basically better stretched out throughout the device, because they now have a much smaller attachment mechanism. I personally would like for them to keep it, I think, basically indefinitely. But yeah, like, I don't think this is happening out of malice. I don't think this is happening so they could like nickel and dime you for new Apple Watch bands. I think that designers really at some point will get bored with doing the same thing over and over again. But it would kind of suck for most consumers. Not for me. I'm pretty much a 2-band Apple Watch guy, and it wouldn't be a deal breaker for me to like repurchase my favorite leather band and just order it with the sports band with whichever I liked at that moment. So, to the end, the company has explored a new magnetic band attachment system, though it's unclear if it will be ready or used in the Apple Watch 10 revamp. That kind of, to me, is a really big cop-out, because if it has such a drastic new design, if it's thinner, and the thinness, like the smaller volumetric size, is basically like the key to it is the new Apple Watch attachment mechanism. It's kind of weird to me that like, oh yeah, but they might not have it, so then the design changes will be much smaller, unless Apple is like willing to cut like the battery size or something like that. Even bigger changes are coming as well. A micro LED display that tops the color and clarity of the current OLED screens, as well as technology for monitoring blood pressure. Interesting that he leaves like links here. I know what those links are saying. It's like micro LED is like 2025 at the earliest. But because we've had like rumors about like 2024, but this is from January. We've had like basically a rebuttal to this, that it would take until like 2025. And when we go to like the blood pressure, this is like 2027 technology. So it's weird that he's trying to like, again, this is a super old article to say it's coming in 2024. Oh my god, like, just chill. Like this article is from 2022, like April 2022. This article is over a year old, way over a year old. So this is what I don't like about Mark Gurman, and I will probably like timestamp this as like a mini rant on Mark Gurman. It's like he loves to bring up previous rumors as like basically like sprinkles on top of more realistic rumors. It feels like he actually has some leaks for the Apple Watch X, right? But now he's bringing in rumors that have either changed, and he isn't committing that micro LED would come to it. If it's coming in 2025, then it having micro LED, in my opinion, actually starts making sense, because micro LED would be even more efficient. It would actually be even a little thinner than OLED, depending on how great Apple's like first gen micro LED actually is. But by all accounts, you can get micro LED to be even thinner. Then I think micro LED could, similar to how OLED on the iPhone 10 was the precursor to like a full screen experience, I think micro LED on the Apple Watch could be the precursor to a much thinner Apple Watch. And then blood pressure technology, who knows, maybe Apple gets it done by like 2025, but there's like zero guarantees for it. Blood pressure technology, blood sugar technology. Again, like blood pressure is like a little more likely to me, because apparently Apple had like some working version of it a while ago, but they couldn't get it precise enough for like everyday consumers to not basically scare the shit out of them with inaccurate readings. But to me, saying that, oh, it could have blood pressure technology, at least he isn't mentioning like blood sugar technology, which I believe for some reason I assumed for a second that he meant that. But like blood pressure could actually come in 2025, but then again, he still hasn't committed to like, is it 2024, is it 2025? It's the kind of thing where Mark Gurman doesn't have like a very high up like leak sources for every kind of device. He clearly has like better sources for the iPhone than he does like the Apple Watch. So he heard something interesting here, and he tries to basically prop it up a little bit with other rumors that have either been rebutted by himself or somebody else at this point, or rumors that were so unsubstantiated, then bringing them up again without any further information. Kind of borders on like journalistic malpractice. I know that like leaking shit is like not viewed as like the highest form of journalism anyway, so the editorial guidelines for this are much lower, but it still feels a little bit worse than what I would imagine like Mark Gurman could actually deliver. And then yeah, so basically we are done with the Apple Watch. I kind of have to say, like, I'm glad that I didn't get like hyper excited for like seeing, oh, Mark Gurman has like rumors about Apple Watch X. I think I will be perfectly happy with buying an Apple Watch Ultra with like the best processor ever in an Apple Watch, and then I will just wait for like micro LEDs, sufficient sensor changes, and then I will find somebody to hand down my Ultra, and then I will keep that next model for like 5 or 6 years. But overall, I think it's a little bit thin on information. Don't you guys think so? It's not bad. It's not like he's malicious in what he does, but overall, it's also very clear that, for example, when we are getting now to the Mac stuff, he clearly seems to have either like better sources or maybe just slightly better understanding of the actual topic. So yeah, I'm more inclined to be believing what I'm reading now than what I just read to you, basically. And he starts by saying we are now able to map out Apple's M3, M3 Pro, M3 Max, and M3 Ultra chips based on developer logs. Okay, so developer logs, definitely not top secret information in the same sense, but it's very clear that he has a good handling of that. We have had like some trickle down, basically reporting over months and months when it comes to developer logs. So I'm actually quite happy seeing like a decent summary on it. I wanted to maybe make a video on this like a few days ago, but this to me seems like the best kind of summary we are gonna get right now. So, after months of reporting on Apple's next-gen Macs and processors, he can now paint a fairly clear picture of the M3 Mac roadmap. So far, we've learned the specification of the M3, the M3 Pro, and the M3 Max chips, along with which new Mac models are in the pipeline. The actual specs could change, so again, no full commitment, clearly no clear like leak sources for this. Like the developer logs are the source here, but like nobody from inside Apple who is like giving him information, which is ironic because like a year ago or so he was like giving us M2 extreme leaks, or even like 2 years ago he was like giving us M1 extreme leaks and something like that. So it kind of all, you know what I mean? Like, it's clearly, like, I think Mark Gurman fell off just a little bit. Like, he clearly was never perfect, and I do like what he does in general, but I think whenever he's unnecessarily vague, it's very clearly to protect his own ass here, so that people aren't too angry when he gets something super wrong. But his outline should give you a sense of what to expect from the M3 generation. So the M3 will have 8 CPU cores, the same configuration as on the M1 and the M2. 4 performance, 4 efficiency cores, and 10 GPU cores like on the M2. Macs that will use the chip will be the base MacBook Pro, the 13-inch, I think that means, the 13-inch MacBook Air, the 15-inch MacBook Air, the Mac Mini, and the iMac, and the next iPad Pro. We don't get a full like release schedule, which one comes first. There were rumors that like the iMac would get it first. We aren't sure. It would have been nice to actually get some actual leaks here, but some people might say, oh, why isn't like the M3 finally getting more cores? I would say it has a lot to do with like the mass production of the M3, because the M3 Pro, or just the Pro and Max chips and the Ultra chips, they're much lower volume. Apple can really get a lot of money out of people for those chips. Here, efficiency is actually king, and efficiency does suffer the larger die you use. So it's not just that more cores would deliver more performance asking for more power, but even in moments where you aren't fully utilizing the chip, you would likely be using more energy. And since most people won't actually need that much more energy, Apple would basically be shipping something like giving you more value where people aren't even asking for it, and Apple definitely isn't in the mood for that. And if they make the chip unnecessarily large, they could come into production problems like meeting demand if it's extra high. So I understand why it's still 4 performance cores, 4 efficiency cores, especially when you look at products like the iPad Pro, the MacBook Airs. I don't think you need that much more. And now the M3 Pro. Now the M3 Pro and the M3 Max do share a die usually. I don't know if that will still be the case, but usually the M3 Pro is like basically the M3 Max with like a significant part of the GPU portion cut off. But in this case, this is why they do have the same CPU configurations on the M1 Pro and M1 Max, and on the M2 Pro and the M2 Max. But in this case, we are finally getting a proper differentiation. It seems to be that this would likely still be binned, but who knows, this might be a different die. So let's get into it. The base configuration of the M3 Pro would have 12 CPU cores, 6 performance, and 6 efficiency cores. That's interesting. 6 efficiency cores, that's 2 more efficiency cores than we currently have. And it would have 18 GPU cores, so that very much lines up with, like, it's the logical evolution of the M2 Pro. And then the top config would have 14 CPU cores, 8 performance and 6 efficiency cores, and then the full die would just be 20 GPU cores, while currently it maxes out at 19 here. So, and it would be used on the 14-inch MacBook Pro, like the base 16-inch MacBook Pro, and the Mac Mini. This is very interesting here because we now are seeing a difference that I honestly didn't expect, which is the efficiency core count. We do have more efficiency cores here than we have here. There's no legitimate binning reason to disable 2 efficiency cores here, unless we're just talking about power consumption, but no. If you have already 12 performance cores, it doesn't really matter if you have 4 or 6 efficiency cores. Like, my speculation here would probably be that, like, Apple is switching up the dies between the Pro and the Max series, and that this is its own chip, significantly smaller, significantly cheaper to make, and also significantly more efficient. Well, as is the M2 Pro, but like significantly lower power usage at the very least. So that would be very, very interesting to see how it affects any kind of other functionality of the device. Its connectivity to external displays and stuff like that, but obviously I cannot speak for that right now. So 6 performance, 6 efficiency cores, or 8 performance, 6 efficiency cores. This is honestly where, with those kinds of upgrades, I would actually encourage more people to just stay with the base configuration. That's plenty of cores for most people. There's barely any GPU difference. Like, this would be like probably like a $200 upgrade for like the 14-inch model, while assume the 16-inch version just comes with the higher end configuration as the baseline, which would also be like a nice update in general here. But yeah, so and with the GPU cores, we are seeing a very, very small increase in GPU core count, but we did have rumors that the A17 that the A16 was supposed to have a big GPU architecture redesign, so I wouldn't really base performance prediction on core counts here. They can change wildly. Like, Apple had generation where they actually decreased GPU core counts on their A series chips, but they ended up being much faster because it was like a completely new architecture. So I wouldn't really worry about that, especially since also, of course, like clock speeds and caches would also play into that, even if the architecture is pretty similar, because all of this is going to be on 3 nanometer, so of course it's going to be better. My cat is scratching the wall. Have you gone crazy? And then M3 Max, which is like, it's very, very different here. Like, 16 GPU cores, 12 performance and 4 efficiency cores. That is a big upgrade. Like, the GPU cores, again, very, very small changes, like in how many cores exactly you have, but the CPU cores are what's interesting here. And here we have like 50% more performance cores and the same amount of efficiency cores. So this leads me to believe that there's really no point for Apple to make those on the same die, because now they have, like, I think when they first launched it, it made sense to put the Max and the Pro basically on one die, because they didn't know what exact demand they should expect, and they had far fewer products using those different chips. Now they have the Mac Mini, the different MacBook Pros just for the M3 Pro. On the M3 Max, they have now the Mac Studio and the MacBook Pros, and the popularity of the MacBook Pros has exploded. And I honestly would be like surprised, like the 14-inch MacBook Pro, I kind of have to say, like, the high-end configuration sounds kind of insane here, with like not that it's impossible, because the current 14-inch version has can max out to like a similar GPU core count, but at which point wouldn't you not just be better off just slightly clocking those 32 cores higher, and or even just benefiting from slightly lower power consumption? I have like the M1 Max on my 14-inch version that has the full 32 cores instead of 24, and I do max it out actually in like emulation tasks and something, but yeah, I could get by with 24 cores, and I think with that kind of difference, I kind of would encourage people to stay with that base configuration. Even on the 16-inch MacBook Pro, like unless you are doing like 3D rendering or something and really know you can benefit from this, and who knows? Again, we aren't seeing any details on things like ray tracing or technologies like that, so I cannot guarantee that either as like extra, basically like cream on top of a great processor update. And then the M3 Ultra basically like doubles this from 16 CPU cores to 32, which means it goes from 12 performance cores to 24, and from 4 efficiency cores to 8. That would be really nice. And then the top configuration keeps the same CPU configuration, and here we see just a doubling to a full 80 GPU cores, up from 40 on the Max version. So that's expected. Mac Studio and Mac Pro. Again, if Apple continues to make those, I think those are weird comments because Apple clearly will make Mac Pros. I think the actual shape and functionality of the Mac Pro will always be a little in flux. But just because some people made like mean YouTube videos about the Mac Pro, because it, especially with it being on the M2 generation, which isn't like the most liked one because the M1 was so good that people are basically pissed off that Apple gave them like better better chips for the same money. I have no idea why. I know the Mac Pro is currently overpriced. Apple has very easy levers to pull. Currently, the base Ultra to the top Ultra has like a $1,000 price premium. Apple could like have the base configuration in the Mac Studio with the still $1,000 upgrade, and currently the Mac Pro also comes with the base configuration, but they could just say that it now comes always with the top configuration. So that would be already like $1,000 of extra value, and of course Apple could just put in more storage and more RAM. This is the last point we're going to get to, which is another change coming in the M3 generation of Macs could be the amount of memory. The MacBook Pros in testing include 36 gigabytes and 48 gigabytes, suggesting some possible new options. Right now, the MacBook Pros can be ordered with 16, 32, 64, and 96 gigabyte configurations. So that would be interesting. My question is like, are we getting like a 9 gigabytes of RAM on the base M3? Because you have to consider, right, like this is 4 gigs more than like 36 and 32. So assume the 16 gigabyte version would now go up to an 18 gig version. So would that mean that an 8 gigabyte configuration goes up to 9 gigabytes? Does Apple maybe have like some kind of extra on-cache memory, on-die memory, like that connects basically like on top of it? Could that be like a fixed memory amount? But the fact that you go from 36 to 48 suggests that Apple could be like using different like 12 gigabyte or basically like 6 gigabyte modules, 6 of them here, 8 of them here maybe, or something like that. I really cannot say. Like, those leaks about the memory were always a little untypically crazy for Apple, so I will not be prejudging how successful that will be, like how much more it will be. I think the current RAM problem is not the amount but the pricing to upgrade it, and so that's obviously like something very different to consider here. But yeah, so if it is even just a little bit more, it's always welcome. It's a little bit more value if Apple keeps the same prices. Hopefully they lower them, but then again, with inflation, I don't see Apple like lowering prices at all. I think they will be just very happy to keep like their high prices for as long as possible until they have to give you like 50 or even a percent or even like double the amount of extra memory or storage for the same price, because memory and storage have come down in price like crazy. So if you're in the do-it-yourself market, like on PC, you can get like a $60 like PCIe 4.0 drive, while for Apple it costs like $200 to upgrade from 256 to 512 gigabytes, and then another $200 from that 512 gigabytes to a 1 terabyte. And if you want the 2 terabyte version, then you're paying an extra $400. So Apple isn't asking anymore like 4 times the market price. Apple is now asking like 6 times the market price. It's insane, and it's the one thing that I hate about Apple, because I think this has nothing to do with Apple just liking margins. It's Apple deliberately being obtuse on when market conditions change. They try to tell people, oh look, we are keeping prices the same but offering you something better. Yeah, but your production costs on certain components have come down so much. You should be... I don't expect the actual individual upgrade prices to come down, but at the very least I then expect 256 to change into 512 gigabytes, and then I expect like maybe like going from 512 to 2 terabytes right away for the $400 that it previously cost to go from 1 terabyte to 2 terabyte. So at least you would be getting like 33% to 50% more value on each individual upgrade, while you should theoretically be having like 100 and 150% more value. That's just not how Apple rolls, and I understand that, but realistically there is room here to satisfy customers in a way that I think Apple is deliberately keeping off until the market basically forces them. And similar to how the MacBook Air, the 15-inch MacBook Air, is like $100 to even $200 cheaper than I think many people expected. That's because the demand for laptops crashed like crazy post the coronavirus pandemic, and people starting to work from home. Now they have the tech to work from home, and they aren't upgrading right now. So in this case, would Apple be then like inclined to give us more storage, maybe a little bit more memory, just so that they can say we now also not just have something better, but legitimately something with better value? Cannot guarantee that, but I would very much like to see that. And he basically concludes, it's 3 nanometer from Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing. And the first M3 Max should debut in October. We don't know which one, but again, we had rumors that would be the iMac, which is currently the 1 Max still stuck on the M1 generation. And then the Reality Pro branding, I don't think that's interesting to any of us. I do have to go soon anyway. Again, this isn't like a super detailed report. Like, I would expect some kind of report like this to maybe clear up some of the memory confusion that we had, maybe any kind of like pricing changes. Again, I do understand that pricing is very volatile and Apple always changes it, maybe up front, behind the scenes, like last minute if they really need to. But I would like if Mark Gurman had like leaks about like the MacBooks coming with double the storage. I honestly think that to a lot of people that would be more relevant than even like processor changes. And if Apple had come out with the M2 generation and doubled storage across the board, with the same pricing, right? So instead of 256, you get 512. And now, even without those crazy like different configs that I suggested, right, like going from 512 right to 2 terabyte, they could still, like, instead of 256 to 512, you now just start at 512 instead of from 512 going costing it to 1 terabyte. You keep the 100, you keep the $200, but then it's also just another $200 to go from 1 terabyte to 2 terabyte, right? So what previously was like an $800 upgrade, right? 256 to 512, that's $200. 512 to 1 terabyte, that's another $200. And then 1 terabyte to 2 terabyte, that's $400. So that's $800 just to go to 2 terabytes, which in the industry will cost you like $120. And it will actually be faster than the storage you can get on the MacBook Air, around twice as fast actually. But in this case, you would start with 512, you would upgrade to 1 terabyte with $200, and then to 2 terabytes also with $200, or maybe even like $300, right? If Apple really wants like super crazy margins, suddenly you go from $800 to $400 or $500 with a much more reasonable starting configuration, which, like, if Apple wants to sell you a lot of like apps on the Mac App Store and something like that, it's hard for me to imagine how that even works with like 256 gigabyte devices, because like, even as a student, right? Okay, you might not have much else, but you have your notes, and you probably sync like lower quality versions of your photo library to your Mac. Yeah, that's at least like half of your storage. So what else? Like, what kind of games will you be installing here? Like Stardew Valley, sure, which by the way is on Apple Arcade, but for some reason not on Mac. Like, the fuck. So yeah, again, I'm trying to tell people value doesn't always just excitement for technology doesn't always come from just being faster or like having a crazy new screen. Sometimes things like more storage, even a little bit more RAM. I understand RAM isn't as exciting for regular people, but I think Apple should go from 8 gigabytes to 12. That's because they do have a 24 gig configuration. So instead of asking you to go from 8 gigabytes to 16 gigabytes for $200 and from 16 gigabytes to 24 gigabytes, my suggestion would be you would start at 12 gigabytes, and then for $200 you're getting to 24 gigabytes. It would streamline logistics for Apple. It would give base configuration buyers a much more future-proof device, if you want to use that word, and it would give enthusiasts a really easy excuse to get a lot more RAM, because suddenly you're getting, instead of 8 gigs of RAM for $200, you're getting 12 gigs of extra RAM for $200. So again, I did pay out the wazoo for my MacBook. Like, I have a 1 terabyte MacBook Pro with the highest end configuration, M1 Max with 32 gigs of RAM. Again, I wish I could kind of have gotten 2 terabytes because I didn't know I would be getting into like video production when I bought it, but that's not a problem. I will just get an external drive whenever I need it. For now, I do have like 750 gigabytes still free, so I'm definitely not currently constrained on it, and live streaming definitely helps more than doing like essay videos, but I think for the amount of money that I paid, I shouldn't have even had to think about getting 1 or 2 terabytes. I should have just been given 2 terabytes for like way over $3,000 at that time. And even back then, like, even PCIe 4.0 storage was not that expensive, and to keep the same pricing for storage upgrades while actual market prices have gone down like 3 to 4x, that is pretty crazy to me, and it's not something I like. It's at least like 2 times less expensive than it used to be to get like even like the best storage, and we now are getting the first PCIe 5.0 storage. So at the very least, Apple should give you like the same amount of storage but much faster storage. I'm starting to ramble because I will probably, like, if I have time later on to timestamp this video, I will mark all of this as useless rambling. But yeah, so we are getting very interesting new devices from Apple. Cheaper iPhones, redesigned Apple Watches, much faster Macs. I still believe that in the consumer technology space, nothing comes close to the Apple ecosystem. I still believe that nothing comes close to the overall excitement that Apple can entice in people. Not just because of marketing or people are Apple sheep, but because the actual end user experience is so polished. Just the one thing that I want is a little bit more value throughout my device purchase experience, and not just throughout my device usage experience. Like that. So again, don't take it as hatred for anything. I do think that we should all be criticizing Apple here. I think we should all be criticizing a lot of companies. When you think that like Dell not too long ago still was trying to sell you 4 gig memory laptops, and even now like 8 gigabytes on Windows is complete trash. So this isn't exclusively like targeting Apple, or was it HP? I'm not quite sure. So this was a longer video than I expected, but I actually liked making it. I hope you guys watch it afterwards. I know some of you had to leave midstream. We had a decent amount of viewers in between. Thank you guys for supporting my last 2 videos that I've done like now in the course of 36 hours. I am getting pretty tired, and I do have some plans tomorrow. Maybe I will find some time to stream. Don't forget that I do have a Patreon now. If you want to support, you will find the link in my basically channel description on YouTube. And as always, contact me on Twitter or through comments. Like, subscribe, share. Thank you guys so much. This is Mark Tech tuning